Today I will tell you a story of adults, young children, pregnant women and the elderly who kindly skipped this video. Today's story begins in a corporate office, between a capable manager and a small employee. The little girl who works overtime and the head of the department do adult stuff together in his office. "Miss Yeon Hae, come here," he ordered. The girl stepped forward shyly, one leg kneeling on the chief's lap, hesitantly, leaning close to his face and whispering, "Chief, if you have so much work today, or..." Without letting her finish her sentence, the man kissed her on the lips, stroking all over her mouth with his tongue, making it impossible for her to repudiate. "No matter how much work you do, you have to eat," he said, "and the way he feeds her is like this." He lifted her onto the desk, unbuttoning the buttons of her top, a beautiful soul with a full figure. She wore a lace-lined black bra, which covered her youthful breasts. "Chief," she said shyly. "Right," he reminded coldly. Hands propped up on the table. Yeon Hae. This sentence pleased the person above her. He excitedly flipped up her tight and short pencil skirt. The inside was smooth, soft, and wet. The head of the department reached inside and twirled his finger slightly, joking, "You must not be loud somewhere. The security guard is going to go to security check in the evening." The trembling staff member snapped slightly, "Yeon Hae." The pleading voice didn't slow the man down. He laughed, "I'm not dressed. Why are you so wet? How about taking the bus to work?" This was both stimulating and exasperating him, lifting her legs sharply, increasing the speed of her fingers, and then placing those sticky fingers in the girl's mouth. Then his pants buckle opened, and he was about to enter when the sound of the security guard sounded outside. The head of the department spoke up saying he was working overtime. The security guard said to check the area because he heard the printer working. Saying that, he happily left. Now a big machine is really working at full capacity. "Look at me, it seems so comfortable. Don't think about anything else while you're with me," he lifted her chin and said. The sneaky fun made them hysterical. Yeon Hae just enjoyed this. Suddenly tears fell from her eyes. She merely thought it was a carnal relationship, but seemed to develop very strange feelings. This exemplary employee joined Dae Ju to work with the greatest dedication possible. She often worked overtime and did all the things her colleagues asked. She is gentle and kind, but few friends, even in the company. She is quite reserved. She arrived early every day, turned on the computer and made coffee for the whole room, and so everyone got used to it. She was tired of overtime with the manager last night this morning and arrived a little late, so her colleague did it for her. He happily bragged to her like it was a great favor. Yeon Hae sighed. It seemed that everyone was used to it as their duty. She hadn't been late in years, making relentless efforts. Because money pressure makes it impossible for her to be lazy. She was an orphan assigned by her father to be raised by her biological aunt. From childhood to adulthood she had to work and earn money, support herself and give her aunt to pay her family's debts. He was the new head of the department for a while, skilled and extremely strict. Although their dating relationship had been going on surreptitiously for a while, at work, he was as strict with her as he was with all the other employees in the room. They would meet at a hotel every week, exchange physical needs for a few short hours and then treat themselves as colleagues afterwards. Despite this, the possessiveness of manager Yeon Hae is very high. He always thinks of something to assign to the male employee who is chatting with Yeon Hae. He spared no harsh criticism of the staff in the meeting, especially with the male colleague who often laughed at her. And he didn't respect her at all. She was reprimanded by him for her unsatisfactory work. Tonight, she was alone again. Yeon Hae took off her jacket and tie, and asked her why she was overtime today. It wasn't her job, she said, because she wanted overtime for them. He asked her if she had eaten. "The coffee on the countertop isn't your food." He said she moved all the work into the mail and sent it to him, and he would do it for him. Not letting her refuse, he bent over to grab the computer mouse and perform those operations. Mail was quickly sent to his address. He turned away quickly and said that the lunch box had been ordered, and when she was done she would be back to rest early. He paused and told her not to think about it. She was so thin, every time he was on top he touched her bones, so a little fat was better. Yeon Hae is both touched and shy about it. After work, she went home, and her aunt and cousin went out, leaving a bowl of dishes unwashed. Yeon Hae silently opened the faucet to wash. She had been used to working for her aunt's family for so many years. Suddenly washing, her husband's voice called her name from the room. Yeon Hae trembled in fear, so the mother and cousin did not have to eat but went out to avoid their uncle's drunkenness. He got drunk and started vandalizing. Yeon Hae hid in the room. Outside he couldn't stop screaming. She couldn't hold the door to her room any longer, hurriedly gathering some of her work clothes into her bag. Just then he banged on the door. cursed and beat her. Yeon Hae begged, but to no avail. This time he wanted to physically possess his niece while his wife was away. Choang, the sound of the elf, his screams, and Yeon Hae escaped from the house. Crying and sad, Yeon Hae wandered outside, looking for shelter tonight. Yeon Hae receives a weekly hotel appointment message from manager Kang Jin-hyun. Although she enjoyed being comforted by his big hand, she wasn't in the mood to enjoy that little pleasure right now. She texted back, refusing to go to the hotel tonight for the first time. The next day, at work, Kang Jin-hyun looks annoyed at her, but he is not because of her missed appointment last night, but because of work. She really did not do well. Because she was in a bad mood today, she made several mistakes in the report. Kang Jin-hyun reminded Yeon Hae not to think twice while she was at work, questioning her about the company's agency fees, why some places are higher than others. Yeon Hae said it was the former department head, Kim Gyu-jin, in charge. He said he would work with Director Park on that to confirm the figures. Yeon Hae bowed her head yes, her face full of unfocused tiredness. At this time, Kang Jin-hyun took a close look at her face, lifted her chin, and asked for the purple marks on her face. He questioned the reason for it. He remembered the last time he was with her, he didn't make that rough trail, and asked who made it. He bent over, asking if she had another man, and had been with him last night. Yeon Hae turned his face and said no, he didn't need to bother. But manager Kang Jin-hyun said coldly, whether you care or not is up to you to decide, not you, Yeon Hae. Get out. Yeon Hae bowed her head and said yes. Later, she was at work when her phone rang, that her aunt was texting on the first floor, and needed to talk. Kang Jin-hyun immediately went down to check on his aunt. She asked her if she was okay, and she said she had slept in the sauna last night. Her grandmother, with her fierce and wounded face, her face full of hate, may have been abused by her terrible husband last night. She came not to check on her, but to ask her about her future plans. She said the effort and expense of caring for her since childhood, even though that didn't exist. Now she wants all her savings, and will let her leave her home. Otherwise she would have denounced the fact that yesterday she hit her uncle's face, causing his hands to bleed. She was loud and loud, making Yeon Hae afraid that people would hear. Yeon Hae begged in fear, accepting her request to be left alone, promising to transfer the money to her as soon as she had enough. The sight caught the eye of Kang Jin-hyun, who was buying coffee at the counter, looking at the tears on Yeon Hae's face. The confused mind caused Yeon Hae to make several errors in paying the company's bills, causing colleagues to fail to pay their expenses this month. While Yeon Hae apologized, Kang Jin-hyun appeared and pulled out his phone to call the finance department, saying that the deadline for paying the branch's bills would be delayed, and that all responsibility would be borne by him. He said Yeon Hae brought all the department's bills down to settle. Yeon Hae bowed yes and immediately complied. Moments later she brought the yellow report and bowed again, thanking him for helping her earlier. Yeon Hae tells her to put on her coat and follow him outside. The car is in the basement, go down there first. Yeon Hae is curious, he doesn't have a schedule to go out today. Kang Jin-hyun drove her around a bit. Yeon Hae saw the plane passing by in the sky, and she said the scene was beautiful. Kang Jin-hyun asked her if she liked airplanes, which place did she like best. But Yeon Hae has never flown anywhere, her only travel experience is the village in her grandmother's hometown that she often visits. Yeon Hae asked which partner they would meet within this waterfront area. Kang Jin-hyun said he doesn't like to travel, but likes to drive around like that to relieve stress. He thought this was good for her now. Back at work the next day. She received a text from her grandmother at this time, that her belongings were packed and that she should return to pick them up today. It would be quite late, but she might have to go there to pick up her things and drop them off at the subway station. Yeon Hae was buying some food with some colleagues at a convenience store near the company. Wearing some of the clothes she brought with her when she left the house the day before made a colleague curious about her recent stay at her boyfriend's house. Yeon Hae denied that. Add a colleague to come and choose items together. And the group's basket was carried by Yeon Hae. From behind, Kang Jin-hyun saw all this. He walked over, put his small package of cakes in the basket, grabbed the heavy basket, and greeted them. He said he would pay them for what they bought. The group was happy, not hesitating when their boss was so generous. They delighted in picking up more of what they liked, returning to the office after thanking the manager. Yeon Hae went alone with Kang Jin-hyun. He finished smoking a cigarette in a corner, and they walked while chatting. Yeon Hae said she would leave the items she had just bought in her office. Kang Jin-hyun asked if such a small purchase made her so happy, and Yeon Hae replied, yes. As she looked at him, she thought to herself, just seeing him in such a bright place made her feel good. She imagined that if she could go on a date with him, watch a movie together, and have coffee, it would be great. Yeon Hae handed him a bottle of water, telling him. Kang Jin-hyun patted her head saying he didn't need to, but when he looked at her waiting face, he took it, saying they would meet soon. Tonight, a room-to-room party at a nearby restaurant. The beautiful Yeon Hae was approached drunk by Chief Park. Although some of her colleagues were quite worried about her, no one could drink for her. At this time, Kang Jin-hyun appeared. He happily sat down next to Yeon Hae, raised a cup of wine to wish Chief Park. Yeon Hae is worried about him, offers him a glass of water, accidentally spills the wine cup on the pants of department head Kang Jin-hyun. Kang Jin-hyun got up and went outside to wipe the spilled water. Yeon Hae hurriedly took some paper and followed him outside. As she absent-mindedly searched for him in the corridor, a hand grabbed her hand and dragged her into a nearby room. The door was closed, and there were only 2 people in the room, filled with the smell of alcohol. Immediately Kang Jin-hyun rushed in to voraciously kiss Yeon Hae. Yeon Hae held up a handful of paper to explain why she followed him, saying she was sorry for her awkwardness. But Kang Jin-hyun angrily dodged, grabbed the paper, and told her to quit her habit of admitting her fault. Said and continued to kiss her, stroking her with his tongue. His hands were constantly moving over her. He flipped her shirt over, greedily kissing her breasts. She hadn't been to a hotel the other day, so tonight his ambitions couldn't be stopped. Hands hurriedly slipped under her skirt, groping. Vulgar language is used to describe current feelings. Each sentence makes both of them extremely excited. The hand that felt wet underneath made him change his mind. He just wanted to kiss her here. He blocked her mouth with his tongue, licking her breasts. Then hurriedly unzipped his pants, pressing against her thighs. They were about to enter, when several colleagues searched for them. They almost opened the door to enter. Yeon Hae and Kang Jin-hyun come to their senses again, stopping their clumsy, regretful love. Kang Jin-hyun leaned down and kissed her hair, softly whispering, "You're beautiful," and walked out. Back at the party, Kang Jin-hyun was still blushing, making her colleagues think she was tired from alcohol. The male colleague approached and handed a can of cold water for her to apply on. Yeon Hae happily took it. But the fact that she smiled at her other male colleague made Kang Jin-hyun uncomfortable. He immediately stopped the fun with an order for all employees to finish their work by tomorrow morning and submit it to him. Yeon Hae walked out, intending to go to her grandmother's house to get her things now. Kang Jin-hyun walked behind her. After putting out the cigarette in his hand, he approached Kang Jin-hyun and asked her what she was thinking. The way he looked now reminded her of when he and she had done it in the first place. They were just as drunk, and she, in a drunken fit on her birthday, took the initiative to ask him to join her for another drink. They had been drinking like that, and once a week they would go to a familiar hotel to relieve their feelings for months. Their relationship could only be that way, since she didn't feel she had the ability to move forward with anyone publicly. Yeon Hae rejects Kang Jin-hyun's suggestion to take her home, but Kang Jin-hyun insists on taking her home. Today Yeon Hae is so tired, she no longer has the strength to resist his attention, to his car. Before she gets to the car first, Kang Jin-hyun snatches the can of cold water she was holding in her hand, empties it all, and throws it into the trash. The private driver took them back to the old neighborhood where she used to live. Yeon Hae said she would go in there alone and say goodbye. Kang Jin-hyun had just approached her house when he heard a cursing noise. A big fat woman is grabbing Yeon Hae's hair and hitting her in the face. Yeon Hae cried and didn't dare to protest, leaving her aunt to scold. Kang Jin-hyun ran over, grabbed her hand, and broke it back. Yeon Hae cried while begging him to stop, saying it was her aunt. Kang Jin, goodbye to him. She didn't want him to see her relatives. Kang Jin-hyun sat in the car. She remembered the early days of coming to this department as a manager. He always paid attention to the only girl who was always late for overtime, and did everything everyone in the room told her, never arguing. At first he thought people looked down on her because she was gentle, so he ordered that no one be allowed to do anyone's job to avoid mistakes. But then he heard the staff in the room say Yeon Hae didn't get paid for overtime and help people anymore. So he allowed her to work overtime, and often ordered rice and helped her with her work. Then he cared about her all the time, until the first time she took the initiative to ask him for more drinks. He joined her in expressing all the emotions of his first lovemaking. The beauty of the other, the fascination of lust, everything makes it impossible for them not to go crazy when they are close to each other. At this time, Kang Jin-hyun decided to get off the bus. He wanted to realize their relationship. Kang Jin-hyun gets even more mad when he sees the wounds on her face. He yelled, "What the you are," shoving her to the ground. Yeon Hae screamed loudly, flanked by Yeon Hae's belongings that she threw out. Kang Jin-hyun took Yeon Hae by the hand to the car, saying that she didn't need to pick up the belongings anymore, he would buy new ones for her. Kang Jin-hyun takes her to his house, her first time here. Now he no longer had the appearance of a distant superior, but just a man dressed casually. He prepared things for her to wear, fetched water for her to drink. While Yeon Hae stood near the window watching the city sparkle at night. She had never been to such a luxury apartment. Kang Jin-hyun came in front of her, asking about the wounds on her cheeks. Tell her not to go back to that house. Yeon Hae said she only came back to get things, she would cut them off. As she spoke, tears fell from her eyes. She said he didn't need to bother. Kang Jin-hyun wiped the tears from her cheeks, saying that he cared about her, how could he stop? Honestly, he just wanted to hug her in comfort. Kang Jin-hyun asked Yeon Hae to stay with him, and Kang Jin-hyun said he couldn't. But Kang Jin-hyun said he didn't say he would sleep together. You should look at your situation now, where are you going in the night with this look? Kang Jin-hyun is almost angry. Kang Jin-hyun recalled the image of her carrying the bag running out of the house the day she escaped from her step-uncle. The scene of her carrying the torn bag on the street alone made him heartbroken to madness. Yeon Hae couldn't refuse, at this time she really needed protection from him, she was silent, and the contract was like that, she would stay. That night they actually slept in 2 different rooms. The next morning, as instructed, Kang Jin-hyun takes food from the fridge, eats breakfast, and goes to work. The door automatically locks when she goes out and closes it. But life is not such a beautiful dream. Yeon Hae had just walked out the door when a girl stood in front of her. She knew the well-dressed girl, it was department head Park Se-hee. Kang Jin-hyun and she are the 2 people who joined the company at the same time, both bright people of this company. And they expect to become a couple because of their background and talent. As a small employee, naturally Yeon Hae knows her and she doesn't. She bowed to department head Park Se-hee. She asked in surprise about Yeon Hae's presence here. Yeon Hae reluctantly said that she went to the house of department head Kang Jin-hyun to get some materials for his online meeting this morning. That would avoid much trouble for him, she thought. Park Se-hee heard quite reasonably, and handed the sandwich cake she made to Yeon Hae, telling her to bring it to his company. At work, Kang Jin-hyun looked at the cake on the table and asked Yeon Hae if this was her cake made for him. But the answer made him shut down the smile he had just gathered. Yeon Hae said she helped him hide their relationship, he didn't need to worry. Worried? What do you think is the relationship between us now? Kang Jin-hyun began to get angry. I think you'll find it awkward when there are rumors in the company, Yeon Hae replied seriously. You think I slept with one person and then had fun with another? What did you think when I brought you back to live with me? Kang Jin-hyun asked her. I think it's because you're kind enough to let me stay when I don't have a temporary place to stay. Kang Jin-hyun sadly lifted her chin, looking into her eyes. You really don't know, or pretend not to know. It's not hard to get you, but what I want is something else, Kang Jin-hyun said as he stroked her lips. He took his hand away from her, emphatically saying to wait for him at home tonight, and not to think of anything else that bothered him anymore. Yeon Hae said she wouldn't come to his house again, she didn't know how to explain when she left his house, just like this morning. She needed him to understand what it felt like when she brought this bag of cakes to him. I can do things as I please, but I can't. So, let's stop this relationship. This makes Kang Jin-hyun really annoyed and... Whose end does it mean? Just try and see if you can finish. Saying that, Kang Jin-hyun dropped the key to his apartment on the table, saying, don't run errands for anyone from now on. If anyone asks, say it's your order. To avoid the curiosity of her colleagues, after he left, she immediately put the key in a private drawer, and then locked the drawer with her personal key. In the company, the status of Kang Jin-hyun is still something that the heads of departments and leaders of the company are concerned about. A subordinate reported that perhaps Kang Jin-hyun was just a small department head with no special background that worried standing director Park Tae-won. Perhaps his strict and unabashed work style is due to the culture he absorbed in the United States while studying and working abroad. Around this time, Kang Jin-hyun was quite busy reviewing the company's financial situation. Once in a private meeting, On raised an eyebrow and asked, Director Park, what is the brokerage fee for Yang Sin's enterprise project? Park Tae-won was still thinking about the name of that business, not knowing which one it was, but Kang Jin-hyun continued, the project brokerage fee here is higher than other businesses. I do not plan to approve this fee proposal. Director Park is furious, his 30 years at this company have never met anyone who hinders him like that. He said in a low voice, it seems that you haven't worked long enough that you don't know that there is such a thing as practice in the business. If you don't just want to work a few days here, then put aside some small issues, don't behave immaturely. Kang Jin-hyun replied with a serious face, because of that practice, I was assigned to this overseas business department. With my functionality, I will ignore these unnecessary elements. I didn't answer my question, but I guessed part of it. Director Park angrily slammed the table hard, unable to say anything more. Come to think of it, he was still very angry. Kang Jin-hyun isn't the only employee sent abroad to study, are they planning to open a legal department? Yes, his subordinates replied, it seems so, their orientation perhaps, and Chief Kang is highly appreciated by the Human Resources Department, hearing that next year he will negotiate more of those incentives. It is possible that later he will be appointed to the company's leadership. Park Tae-won crossed his arms, and thought to himself, with that way of working, how can he sit in the leadership position? He suddenly turned to his assistant and asked, is the Busan branch missing a department head, and immediately picked up the phone and called another company leader, with a huffed look. During that time, Kang Jin-hyun and Yeon Hae were also very busy. She did not go to his apartment, but used all the money on her card to rent a house in the suburbs at the cheapest price. Her 30 million won savings were given to her grandmother in exchange for their breakup. In the company, the two don't seem to care about each other much anymore, and dating once a week has also ended. Yeon Hae waited quietly at the train station alone, she was so heartbroken that she couldn't sleep, but maybe everything should go back to its right trajectory. They should get back to where they were. It was about to rain, a few ticks fell on Yeon Hae's hand, she did not open the umbrella but walked quickly to her room. In the small bed of the cramped apartment, like every other night, every time she was alone, she missed him. The moments together, the satisfying feelings that Kang Jin-hyun had for her every time she made love, she went crazy about it. From the first time, he was randomly chosen by her to offer to be around, from which he entered her mind. Suddenly a message came, he texted her, asking if she had slept, why did it take so long to answer the phone? I guess I'm tired, and I'm asleep. What's wrong? Yeon Hae asked worriedly. What makes him call now, what's wrong with him, or is he nearby? Yeon Hae rushed to the bed, holding the phone and saying, are you outside? Wait, can I wait for you? Yeon Hae took an umbrella and ran downstairs, I just looked at him for a moment. Kang Jin-hyun's car was actually parked under her inn. It's been a long time coming, said the flute Kang Jin-hyun. How did you get here? I asked my assistant Kim Eun-hyun, and I said something else, I'm assured, Kang Jin-hyun replied to her worry that people would know about his arrival. For Yeon Hae's sake, whatever I've done, do you need to get on your knees and beg me to get in the car? His sour but pleading tone was confused. Yeon Hae got into the car in the rain, and then stopped at an empty distance. Kang Jin-hyun turned off the phone, turned to Yeon Hae and said calmly, what you said, I thought about you wanting to end this relationship, and concluded that this is not likely. Kang Jin-hyun put his hand to her cheek, his eyes sparkling and drawing him closer, kissing her lips little by little. Penting up the memories of these days into every movement of her lips. He greedily swallowed her tongue and lips. Greedily swallowed her tongue and lips. Kang Jin-hyun kissed down her neck. Pulling her to sit on her lap, facing him, the love began, as passionately as possible. Yeon Hae first took control of the game under the cheers of Kang Jin-hyun. They exchanged feelings of familiarity, grief, seemingly unable to stop the feeling of wanting to get into each other's souls' deepest, every corner. Kang Jin-hyun groaned, what trick did you play with me? It's crazy. At the height of her emotions, Kang Jin-hyun said he would feed her enough to satisfy her, then sprayed all the liquids on her face, bringing them into Yeon Hae's mouth with his hand. I can't let other guys get you. Just thinking of the other guys in that part of you, I wanted to strangle him. And you, can you look at me with another woman? The sharp question pierced Yeon Hae's caution, she really couldn't watch him go with another woman. The sharp question pierced Yeon Hae's caution, she really couldn't watch him go with another woman. Carefully wiping every bit of Kang Jin-hyun's face, he held her shoulders and lifted her chin to look at it, suggesting a real relationship, ignoring the attention of others. Yeon Hae could no longer refuse, they exchanged a sweet kiss in the still night scene, outside there was only the sound of rain murmuring. A few days later, Kang Jin-hyun returned to his grandfather's house, and the housekeeper greeted him, saying that the owner looked so healthy and fresh. Kang Jin-hyun also greeted her, with the most cheerful attitude she had ever seen. Kang Jin-hyun walked into the house, his grandfather was sitting reading a newspaper on a mattress in the living room, the old and simple house. But this is President Choi Shin-hae's home, and the man who took off his glasses is him. He set the news file in his hand down on the table, slowly inquiring about his only nephew. He asked about Kang Jin-hyun's progress when he came to Dae Ju for several months. Did he collect any information? He replied that he believed in me. Grandpa had high expectations for his only grandchild, as well as the only relative he had. It was the grandchild his son gave birth to, and it wasn't until his son's death that he learned of his existence. At that time, he was named Kang Jin-hyun. The president gave him money for living and education, as a long-term loan, the biggest investment of his life. The more mature he became, the braver and more brilliant than his father. And he appointed him head of overseas sales so that he could clean up corruption in the company and rebuild Dae Ju. And the reward was that it would belong to him if he cleaned it up and developed it. At a family dinner, his grandfather asked him about getting married, saying he had arranged for him some good matches. He just had to follow through. Kang Jin-hyun seriously said that he would not do as he said, other things he could do in accordance with the contract, but getting married, he would choose the person he loved. That made him quite angry, so stubborn, daddy. So the meal ended immediately. Kang Jin-hyun, who had not eaten a bite, stood up and left. He went to Yeon Hae's house. She had just finished cooking. Kang Jin-hyun called, saying that she would come to eat, and before she could prepare, he was already outside the door. Kang Jin-hyun went inside. The delicious dinner she cooked was very much to his taste. "I've finished your meal," Kang Jin-hyun said hesitantly. "No, what's the point of eating it all? I feel guilty that I can only serve it to you once." Yeon Hae looked satisfied when all the food was gone. "Then next time you can make it better for me." Kang Jin-hyun raised his face in thought. Kang Jin-hyun continued, "Do you want to live together, Chief?" Yeon Hae looked shyly at her poor, cramped motel room. Kang Jin-hyun didn't let her answer, grabbed the glass of water in her hand, hugged her, and started a kiss. Next is the clothes that quickly mess up on the ground. Our Miss Yeon Hae, with her innocent face, possesses a flawless, erotic body, and likes to wear mysterious black underwear. Her card-rabbit voice sent Kang Jin-hyun into a frenzy. Seeing her figure standing by the window with the curtains closed, Kang Jin-hyun rushed over. The animal pose is deployed right on the sink near the window. The billowing muscles tightened. Yeon Hae is fragile. Every time he sees her, for him it is a wonderful new discovery. The first round between the two knights, between the knight and the princess had just ended. Yeon Hae in her most innocent pajamas came out of the bathroom. She said he should go back, but Yeon Hae said the fashion made it impossible for him to go back. They continued to warm each other during summer nights. Kang Jin-hyun whispered, "You're going on a business trip, and do you want something as a gift?" She only asked for a toy snowball, like the one she used to escape the night at the house she was in. It was broken, and she was saddened by it. It was a gift from her father as a child. Like the little girl selling matches, her dream world is to see from the little world in that snowball. The following week, Kang Jin-hyun went on a business trip to China, where at the company, people talked a lot about his activity. They speculated that he would be transferred to the Busan branch for daring to confront standing director Park, harming some of his recent interests. Hearing this news, Yeon Hae was quite worried. Before sleeping, she texted him as usual. He was quite busy lately, so she didn't want him to bother, only contacted a few times a day. "When you can answer the phone, call me," the message sent from Yeon Hae's mobile phone read. Immediately her phone rang. "What's wrong?" Kang Jin-hyun asked worriedly. "No, what's wrong with you? I heard strange rumors at the company. I heard rumors that you will be transferred to the Busan branch, so I was a little worried," Yeon Hae said. Kang Jin-hyun smiled lightly. What do you think?" "It was said that there was a vacancy for the position of head of department. If you go to Busan, won't you date me again?" Yeon Hae said worriedly, "Chief, now is not the time to talk like that. So far no one has dared to disagree with Director Park. I heard he was very close to the leadership of the corporation." Kang Jin-hyun laughed louder. "Did you just call me for that?" While Yeon Hae was anxious, he asked if I had eaten yet. "I miss you," Kang Jin-hyun said. "I miss you too." This sentence made Yeon Hae go crazy. With stimulating words, Kang Jin-hyun made her blush, hurriedly hung up. In the dark night alone, Yeon Hae dreamily remembers the times with Kang Jin-hyun. She recreates those feelings with her hands, until she enjoys herself to the fullest satisfaction as if he did for her. One morning, Yeon Hae looked at the personnel bulletin board on the wall. Standing Director Park resigned. He was replaced by Interim Director Kang Jin-hyun, head of overseas sales. This stunned the whole company. After all, how good was the manager Kang Jin-hyun able to get Park Tae-won removed from this company? At this time in the office, manager Park Sae he walked past Yeon Hae's place. She greeted her. Just then, a female colleague came to ask her to borrow the key to the women's room that Yeon Hae was in charge of. Kang Jin-hyun yes and opened the drawer, accidentally letting her friend see the key to Kang Jin-hyun's apartment the day before. Park Sae he heard it and turned around and saw the key to the apartment where she lived, which was the same building that Kang Jin-hyun lived in. She then picked up the key and questioned her. It turns out it's because of what kind of legs you have. The harsh words that had just come out made Yeon Hae stunned. She finally couldn't escape their judgment. While most desperate, a familiar voice called out, "What's wrong?" He walked past Park Sae he walked over and hugged Yeon Hae's shoulder, who lowered his face sadly. "Is it okay? Let's talk a little bit," he said. Yeon Hae removed his hand. "You two talk first," and took his bag and walked out in amazement of all the staff in the room. It was indeed the complicated drama of young people. Outside a corner of the stairs, Kang Jin-hyun angrily and sternly tells Park Sae that they have never had a relationship other than work. He flatly rejects her feelings, although she is very angry, but Kang Jin-hyun does not care, and forcefully leaves. All women will be so harshly discarded. But the workplace love bomb when it exploded had consequences. Yeon Hae naively succumbed to her colleagues judging her. The gossip behind her back, including those she didn't know. The fatigue made Yeon Hae almost want to give up. The social divide was really huge. Just the fact that Chief Kang fell in love with an employee in the company made them curious. If they knew that he was the young master of this Dae Ju company, it would probably go even further. The rumors about the nephew reached the president's ears. He called her over, and as soon as he looked at him, Yeon Hae realized his true identity, who was not afraid of Director Park and was extremely strict with the staff. Observantly, the chairman said that Kang Jin-hyun needs to develop his career, and will inherit the Dae Ju Group. And so there needs to be some backing. Hearing this, Yeon Hae bowed her head sadly. She understood and asked for the only thing in the conditions that he gave her to break up with Kang Jin-hyun, which was to transfer her to the research department, in another position. With such a demeanor, he felt quite sorry. If she was in better conditions she would probably be the best choice for his nephew. That evening, Kang Jin-hyun came to her house, fixed the light bulb on the ceiling for her, which surprised her. Kang Jin-hyun said she needed to get to know him again. After a while he continued to fix her another piece of plumbing more than a dozen centimeters, which was both exhausting and fun. But as soon as Kang Jin-hyun stepped out of the saw, Yeon Hae immediately shed tears. She walked to the door, thinking he was gone. She wanted to watch him leave. As soon as he opened the door, Kang Jin-hyun was already sitting there. He turned around, stood up and kissed her. He asked the reason for her sad expression. Their debate achieved nothing. Kang Jin-hyun fails to convince her to be with him. Yeon Hae couldn't ignore the huge distance between them. The next morning, Yeon Hae was ordered to transfer to another department. She cut her long hair, looked much less relaxed, and her dress style was also more open, no longer like the Japanese actresses we usually see. Yeon Hae long ago cut off contact with Kang Jin-hyun. They really were back in their rightful place. Day after day, it is the end of the year winter vacation. Yeon Hae will return to her hometown tomorrow to visit her grandmother, considering it as her vacation after a hard time. Yeon Hae meets her former colleague in the hallway. She asks what she will do this vacation, and Yeon Hae honestly tells her everything. On the way down to the first floor, ending the last day of work before vacation, Yeon Hae met him in the elevator. As soon as they entered, they showed their most sad faces. Kang Jin-hyun turned to Yeon Hae and told her not to wear such an open-necked shirt. He couldn't bear to think of some father licking and sucking at her neck. And he complimented her on cutting her hair beautifully. Yeon Hae just looked at him, didn't say anything, and quietly walked out of the elevator. She had fewer tears since the haircut. She stood alone outside, telling herself that they needed to go their separate ways and forget about each other. Today, at his grandfather's house, Kang Jin-hyun just arrived and said he would quit his job at the company. This made him both angry and surprised. Negotiations between them immediately followed. The two sides finally reached the most satisfying agreement. Kang Jin-hyun took over the company and developed it, and he promised to use all his energies to take on the responsibilities entrusted to him by his grandfather. In return, he was given the freedom to marry, the freedom to pursue happiness as the American Declaration of Independence once declared. Kang Jin-hyun left his house. The old housekeeper had just laid out a cozy tray of rice, but he did not eat and left, causing her to fall a little short. Grandpa slowly said she was about to welcome the new member into the house. Kang Jin-hyun drives up the road, ending the long way in a small country house. The scenery was great. Under the eaves of the house, an old woman had just come out, presumably preparing a meal. "Who are you? What's the matter here?" Kang Jin-hyun politely replied, "I came to find Miss Yeon Hae." Yeon Hae's grandmother was overjoyed. She had never seen such a good-looking young man, especially coming to find her granddaughter. She invited him in, saying she was coming back. She had just come out to the residential office with some work. Moments later Yeon Hae returned. She was casual in a light home outfit. Yeon Hae had just arrived at the gate and saw Kang Jin-hyun's car parked there. She opened the door to find him sitting there, asking him why he was here. Walking through the dusty car, she knew he was tired. What had happened? Now the nostalgia and anxiety for him had made her forget about avoiding him. Kang Jin-hyun said, "I wanted to talk to you, so I came here." Yeon Hae woke up, said he didn't want to say anything, he left. At that moment, her grandmother picked up a pot of ginseng stewed chicken soup. Warm and nutritious dishes are divided evenly into bowls. She couldn't wait to leave him hungry after such a long and cold trip. Kang Jin-hyun also took the opportunity to stay for a meal. The family meal was intimate and full of affection. After finishing, the grandmother, who understood the rush to go out with friends, said it was a long time coming. The two sat on the porch. Yeon Hae offers him a cup of hot tea. Kang Jin-hyun said he wanted her back, he would wait for her to think. The moment she stepped out of the elevator without looking back, that strong figure scared him. He couldn't afford to lose her. "I missed you so much. I've woken up in the middle of the night a few times and come to stand under your house. I love you. This sentence I never had a chance to say to you," Kang Jin-hyun said. Yeon Hae turned to look at him and put her hand on his. "I've liked you so much, Kang Jin-hyun, since I first saw you." The convincing sentence ended all the trouble between them. Kang Jin-hyun kissed her on the lips, a loving, velvet kiss, without any other lust. In the snowy landscape, their image was like in the snowball world she dreamed of. Happiness is what it is. They returned to work, announced their dates, had weddings. Then Yeon Hae quit his job at the company, opening a small restaurant that is self-employed. And their fulfilling lives just like that slipped away. End of story. See you in the following videos. Thanks so much.